On the 19th of January 1942, Wellington Romeo 1646 took off on a routine training flight from RAF Lossiemouth in Scotland. Its last known position was off the northeast coast of Scotland. It is believed the aircraft encountered severe winter snowstorms and, being unable to navigate properly, was blown off course. Unknown to the crew, the aircraft was flying too far south, heading towards increasingly higher ground. The aircraft was never heard of again.
It wasn't until the spring of that year, as the winter snows began to melt, that a gamekeeper out on his rounds discovered the wreckage of the Wellington, high on the ridge above Glenclooney.
Well, when the aircraft was first discovered, the man who discovered it was a gamekeeper in that Glenclooney area, and the glen was buried in snow, and he went up there. He was walking up there when he noticed something glinting on the hill, and he put his telescope on and discovered that it was a part of an aircraft glinting in the sun. He'd never seen that before in these glens. So he came back to Braemar and reported it to my father, who was a sergeant in the Home Guard, and also to the local constable. And the following day, all four of us went up. I was just a young boy, and we went up there, and the snow was waist deep. But we got up as far as we could, and we could quite easily see that it was a part of an aircraft. But what sort of an aircraft or anything, no idea. But anyway, they saw that it was an aircraft, went back to Braemar and reported it to the RAF. And they came and had a look, but they said there was nothing they could do until later in the spring when the snow's away. So that was how it was left. And then the RAF, of course, they came and they searched the wreckage, took a lot of the wreckage. Well, the tail section was intact, and the guns, you know, it was unbelievable when I first saw it myself. After the snow went away, the tail section's lying there, and the rear turret, no broken glass. Guns were pointing up into the air, and the bands of ammunition were all through the guns, you know. So it was quite an eerie sight one way or another, you know. But the rest of it was just a pile, just a huge pile of wreckage. That's all, the rest of it. The tail section was the only part that was really recognizable.
Now where,
Yeah. I thought when I came back from the forces myself that something would have been done, you know, to recognize these, not particularly that one aircraft, but there were many aircraft crashed in the Cairngorm Mountains during the war years. And there was nothing in the village of Braemar to say that all these men had died in the mountains. I thought to myself, I must do something about that, you know, sometime. I must do something. But way back in that time, 1940, 48, 49, 50. The helicopters were just in their infancy, and they couldn't lift any weights. And I knew the engines were there. And I thought, if I could get one of those engines down, make a monument. So the years went rolling past, you know, always this at the back of my mind. Then I could see that the helicopters latterly were getting big and could lift virtually anything. So that's when I got in touch with the RAF Lossiemouth and said, would you be interested in lifting out 2 engines for me on the mountain, which I'd already applied for through the War Office, and I'd been granted the engines. They gave me the engines, so they said, they're yours if you can get them out. So eventually I got the RAF to say, yes, we'll take them out. So they had done a survey. They'd been out on a training flight, and they flew over the area where they knew the aircraft crashed, and they'd looked where the engines were lying. They were down in the ravine, and they said, oh no, we won't lift them out from there. It's too dangerous. So they got in touch with me and said they'd seen the site, but if we had any way of getting the engines up the mountain about 100 yards, they would lift them off for me. So that was when the brain started working and thinking, right, how do we do this? And the only way we can do it is manpower. There's no way we tried to go up already with the machine, and it was too steep, and the driver just turned and said, oh no, it's hopeless. So went the Queen's Guard, the Queen comes to Balmoral Castle every year, and she has a guard that comes, a soldier's guard every year. They come, always different Scottish regiments, but however this year it was the Argyll and Southern Highlanders who were her guard. So I went up to the barracks at Ballater and I got hold of a sergeant major and I told him my project. He said, how many men do you want? I said, 20? No problem. Tell me when you're going to go, and he says, I'll have them all ready and they can go by truck. We'll take our own trucks, he says, and we'll come up. So I had probably about 10, 12 men of my own as well. And we all went up there and we made a cradle out of scaffolding poles. You know, the aluminium scaffolding poles? Well, we made a cradle out of that with all the parts of the pole sticking out in all directions so that all the men could get hold of it all the way around. And we got the engines tipped onto the scaffolding poles and tied, and then up the hill they went. Yeah, and when the RAF told me now, immediately they've got them up, you phone us and we'll come straight away. So however, I couldn't get a signal on my phone, of course, down there. So I had to get in my car and go to the top of the hill where the ski lift is, up where the skiing is, and I phoned from there and said, the engines are in place, but you're ready. So they said, we'll be there in 15 minutes. Yeah.
Come on, Lester! Lester, come on up to here! Lester! Keep coming, I want it centred down there! Right a bit, right a bit! Right a bit, right a bit! Keep coming, a wee bit yet! Go! Keep coming! Keep coming yet! Okay, go! Praise! Schon gängbar.
these mountains there. And just cleared the top of this and then went straight into this hill. Yeah.
It would have been an instant, isn't it?
Oh yeah, absolutely, yeah. And there's the helicopter that took it out, in Bulls, and then they just went up the hill.
Steep climb.
Just looking at the hills around the hill. This is the direction that the aircraft came. This is the part here where it crashed. It just cleared the top of this one here. It came from the south, flying north. It came up over these mountains there, and just cleared the top of this, and then went straight into this hill. Yeah.
It would have been an instant, isn't it?
Oh yeah, absolutely, yeah. And there's the helicopter that took.
The crew's graves can be found in the old churchyard at Dice. Only 2 crewmen's bodies were ever recovered. The remaining crew remain interred where they fell.
Took it out, and there's some of the lads there loading it up on the walls. This is the engines, the state they were in when they came. And then,
you took both engines?
yeah, we took both engines, yes. And that was the best engine that we used, and there's my son working.
This is one of the engines from the fated bomber, which will form the centrepiece of the memorial to the bomber crew. It was recovered from deep within the hills just 3 years ago with the support of the RAF. With detailed plans drawn up and planning permission granted, the memorial should be unveiled by the end of September.
It's going to look just similar to what you see it now, with a beautiful granite plinth underneath.
The Princess Royal arriving in Braemar to unveil a memorial that has been 60 years in the making. Its centrepiece is a section of engine recovered from a Wellington bomber that crashed into the Cairngorms on a training flight in 1942, an apparent victim of poor weather conditions. 7 weeks after the plane was lost, a 15-year-old Andy Brown was in the search and rescue team that discovered its wreckage on the snow-covered mountainside. The find sparked a determination in the young boy that the men inside and others like them should never be forgotten.
As I got older, I really was concerned about all these young lads, 20, 21, 22, who'd come from Australia, New Zealand and Canada, lost their lives in the hills and not in action, you know, which was sad to me. And then over the years after I came home from the services myself, nothing had ever been done to recognise those young lads.
6 men died in that plane crash. 2 were found buried in snow, while the other 4 perished in the blaze that followed the collision. Families of all the crew were contacted ahead of the ceremony, including those of Royal Canadian Air Force Sergeant Robert Jackson.
This is really a once-in-a-lifetime event for us. We've known where the crash took place and whatnot, but actually being here and seeing the people, talking to Andy Brown, who was on the rescue party that went up and got the bodies, is really amazing.
My husband and myself and my mother traveled here 20 years ago and discovered where the crash site was, and we had always thought we'd love to come back and have a memorial place for my uncle, and we were just amazed that someone was doing this.